Welcome. Welcome, everybody. It's short Tales from the Mothership. We have a great group of authors joining us this afternoon. And they're all been asked to write stories that could potentially fit on a postcard and loosely celebrating our mothership library here on our UC San Diego campus. We're the ones, we didn't make this up. We're not the ones who made it up. George Hay, who was a sci-fi magazine editor in the 70s, he encouraged all the great authors of the time to submit a story such that it could fit on a postcard. And one of the first to respond was Arthur C. Clarke. And in fact, Arthur C. Clarke's postcard story is celebrating its 50th anniversary this coming spring, so that's exciting. But we're celebrating here. And again, in case you just joined us, welcome, fellow futurists, intrepid inventors, time travelers, and soothsayers. It's time for short tales from the mothership. I'm your host, Scott Paulson, and oh, I wish you could see that I'm surrounded by instruments. Like, here's my little mallet for my glockenspiel. Oh, and here's my Moog Voyager. I even have a full-size orchestral harp here. It is outrageous that you can't see it. Sorry about that. Some beautiful vinyl chimes, a couple theremins, and some other surprises hiding here and there. I wish you could see it all. Next year, we'll have a GoPro up high in the sky, and you'll be able to see everything. I'm just going to give a little motif at the end of everyone's story, just so they have a graceful exit. But I think it's time to talk about our first story. Our first story comes from author Carlson Jin. And Carlson is in another part of the galaxy. You couldn't be with us today. And reading for Carlson Jin is one of my favorite narrators, Barbara Henderson. Barbara, are you aboard the mothership? Are you aboard?
I am, Scott. I'm aboard.
Thank goodness. Now, tell me, what is the title of the story that you're reading?
Carlson's story is entitled Peace.
Well, I'd love to hear it.
Peace by Carlson Jin. The end of the world was broadcast on television. Every single human being on the planet with access to a TV tuned in for the event, although perhaps not very many suspected that was what they were seeing. It was the most momentous event in human history, said some, those who were not religious at least. The day that aliens landed on Earth. They had announced their coming long before telescopes detected the first glint of sunlight on the hull of their massive spaceship. In 40 languages, the same message repeated. We are peaceful. We mean you no harm. Which naturally, everyone took to mean that they did indeed mean great harm to humanity. The ship was large but featureless, with no visible weapons. But what would alien weapons look like anyway? It descended from the sky and came to a rest, hovering over the center of the Atlantic Ocean. For whatever reason, they sent only a single landing craft from there to touch down in Kenya, near the birthplace of the human species, where it was met by a single news crew there to film a documentary. Satellite link-ups were quickly established, and every television on the planet flickered to life on the image of a dusty savanna, a silver ship, a group of 5 dark-skinned tribesmen, and the 3 alien visitors. The moment doom was levied on the world was missed by most. It was easy to overlook. The alien, there in the back, the one on the left, the dust rose around it. And it sneezed. So simple a thing. The aliens, so advanced in their technology and science, had grown far beyond the need to concern themselves with little things like germs. But life is adaptable. It finds a way. The virus, so long denied a fertile breeding ground, found its way into a human lung. A year later, The only thing that moved upon the face of the world were the shadows of clouds. Doom had not come from the fist of nature or the hand of God, nor the machines of man. It had come from peace.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm sure Carlson Jen is going to be very pleased with the way his piece was presented by you. Thank you again, Barbara. Our next author is Ariel Amante. Ariel, are you aboard the mothership?
I am aboard the mothership.
Oh,
Hi.
excellent. And tell me, what is the title of your story?
Petroleum Angels. Oop, can't hear you? Sorry, Scott, can't hear you.
Read now. You're on.
Thank you. Cool. All right, so just to give some context before I read, Sentience is a company that manufactures empathic androids. Petroleum Angels. A sentient android's programmed empathy and compassion only perceives the pain of the present moment. It cannot dream of the future. They eventually recommended suicide as a form of comfort to their human companions. Naturally, sentient androids began to determine through psychological metamorphosis and adaptation that killing oneself was the only way to eradicate pain, because it permanently ended suffering. To be honest, I understand why an android concludes death is the ultimate solution. Life is either the most fulfilling euphoria, or it's a mutating infection that finds new ways to poison you inside. And grief is a force that can never be defeated or suppressed. But artificial intelligence created to replace human connection is meant to fail, because how can one perfectly articulate to a machine what it means to be dead inside, but still physically alive? Sentience is a fool. Healing is just as dynamic as pain. It's an ability and experience only human beings possess and share with one another. Sentience, nor any artificial intelligence creation, will never find a way to encompass that. The things that are limitless can never be trapped inside a box. If anything, we trigger an imbalance in the things larger than ourselves when we try to do so. Human beings really need to give themselves more credit. We've come this far after all. The main issue with an android with programmed empathic tendencies is that it will never experience humanity, which I believe is what truly saves us in the end. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ariel. An amazing story, very well read by you. Our next author, I believe he's in the house. Is Will Bowen aboard? Because if not, I can certainly read his story. So I'll get it out right now. Will Bowen is a great friend of ours. And I'm sorry, he must be stuck in an airlock somewhere, apparently.
I'm here. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
Will Bowen is aboard. He was stuck in an airlock and he just got
I
out,
was
apparently.
muted. I was muted.
Well, Will Bowen, let's start by asking you, what is the title of your story?
It's called Throw My Dust to the Stars.
Well, I think it's time to read it.
Can you see me okay?
I can hear you, and that's what counts.
Oh, you can't see me? Oh, okay.
It'll just make it that much more dramatic, Will. Go for it.
Okay. They were there to throw my dust to the stars. Sarah, and
God, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties there. Would you be able to take over?
We are having technical difficulties with Will Bowen's story, so I'm going to read it for him because it's such a great story.
There's a bit of an echo, so we'll see if we can get him back on maybe later on. But go ahead and.
Shall I read his story, or shall I continue with another author?
Let's have you go ahead and take over.
I just love this story, so I will read Will Bowen's story. Throw my dust to the stars. They were there to throw my dust to the stars. Sarek and my beloved Antel. They hooked up pretty fast once I was out of the picture. Maybe even before? What can you do? I am dead, deceased, no longer living, lifeless, useless, inert, just dust. Dust with eyeballs. Yes, I can still see the world around me. I see it all. But I'm just dust, a fine gray powder that smudges easily, a figment, a purloined ghost just hanging around in limbo and the in-between state, hoping for revenge, stalling the bright light that will take me past the stars to the afterlife. Can there be revenge? All that's left of me is in the shiny gold urn that sits on the console of our ship. The lovebirds are giving it a space burial, tossing it into a sea of stars, into the light and dark, into the void. It will float for eons, deep, deep into space, space that touches everywhere and nowhere. I will end up at the bottom of the universe. How romantic. I have wondered if the ant I squished under my finger misses himself. Did they wonder? Yes. I miss myself. I wanted to see the future. I'm holding out for one last act, done for the honor of the ant that was forgotten. One last program will run as the urn leaves the airlock. A shipboard self-destruct sequence will initiate, sweetening those two birds' ride across the stars. Oh, Will Bowen, you vengeful man. That was a wonderful story. We'll bring you on the end when you've got some sound and say hello to you. For the meantime, we're going to continue. Is Bettina Davis in the house?
Yes, I'm ready.
She's aboard. You are aboard the Mothership. Good to see you again. This is a return trip for Bettina.
Yes.
Bettina, what is the title of your story?
Meeting the Mothership.
Please proceed.
Okay. Meeting the Mothership. When COVID-19 closed UCSD, the campus facilities department decided it was the perfect time to overhaul the computer systems. I was assigned Geisel Library, and except for a security guard, I had the run of the place. Every day, I would sit by the window where the ravens nested while I ate lunch. I'd say hello and goodbye to them. It felt a little silly, but they would flap their wings and nod at me as if they understood. One day, after lunch, I heard a low voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When will the voices return? I didn't quite believe what I'd heard anything, but the crows were both staring at me, heads cocked expectantly. When? The voice reverberated through my chest. Who? I stammered. I swear one of the birds winked at me. Storytellers. What the hell? I talked to the birds, so I answered the building. The students? Well, when the pandemic is over, probably next fall. No stories for many days. The ravens flapped and bobbed. I could hear them squawking faintly through the glass. Crew says few humans are outside. Crew? One of the ravens pecked at the glass. With me many generations, born and fledged. I stared at the birds while my brain struggled to catch up. Best planet I found for stories, and crew says good flying here. Wait, are you saying you're a spaceship? Interstellar story seeker. Do you know any stories?
Thank you so much, Bettina. It was great to have you on this return trip, and I especially appreciated that you were on the holodeck in some semblance of your parlor at home from 2020. It looked great. Our next speaker is Nicholas Deason, and Nicholas was traveling late. Did you make it aboard, Nicholas?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you and I can see you. And Nicholas as well is on the holodeck in what seems to be his bedroom from 2020. No, I'm so glad you're comfortable there. So Nicholas, tell me, what's the title of your story?
It's called The Last Box. And I'll go ahead and get started. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, Captain, the day has finally come, said Lieutenant Summers. We're out of food. It was true. Ever since the separation, their small module had been careening toward oblivion. The main spacecraft and the other crew were now distant memories, and supplies were finally running thin. "You'll have to fight me for the champagne," Summers said, retrieving one of the last items. It had been meant for celebrating Mars' orbit. "Kidding," Summers said. But of course, he wasn't. "Would you like some, Captain?" No reply. "Suit yourself," he said with a shrug. He opened the bottle, no pop in 0G, and took a long swig. It would make what he was about to do more palatable. "I know what you're thinking, Captain," Summers said. "I know what you've been thinking all along. Your silence says it all. You want to kill me. You want to kill me and eat me, don't you?" Again, no reply. "So it's like that, is it? Well, if you won't make the first move, I will." Summers smashed the champagne and propelled forward. He plunged the broken bottleneck into his companion. Sharp glass cut easily through cardboard. Bits of crunchy breakfast cereal spilled from the captain's insides. Summers stuffed handfuls into his mouth until nothing remained. "I'm sorry, Captain. I had to." Summers maneuvered back to the shelf. He grabbed the last box, blue with an orange feline figure on the front. "It's just you and me now, Tony," he said, stroking the box. "Good kitty."
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you so much. Can you barely hear the theremin that I pulled out of my bathroom while you were giving your story? Barely hear that. Next year, we'll be in person, Nicholas, and you'll play the theremin for us. Like, trust me, I'm just going to turn the volume down now. Oh, I'm out of the screen. Thank you again, Nicholas. Really appreciated that. Our next story comes from Diane Dotson. Diane, are you aboard? Are you aboard the mothership?
I'm aboard.
Thank goodness. What's the title of your story?
The title of my story is The Story Light.
Oh, I remember this one, and I told you I was going to play harp along with it, but it's such an elegant little story. I'm only going to play harp at the very, very end. Please proceed with your story.
Tish begged her grandmother for one more story. Grandma chuckled. "I'll tell you about the story light." "What's the story light?" Tish asked. Grandma folded her crinkly hands. She began, "When I was little, my family lived far from a library. I wanted to read more than anything. I wanted adventures. Late one day, an old man with a tall hat drove a pickup truck out to the farm my parents worked. My parents went to meet him." Grandma hugged Tish's shoulders. "This man called himself Professor G. He said, 'I've got a big stack of adventures to give you, but you must work my story light.' My brothers and I looked at Mother and Dad. They winked. He held a strange lantern in his hands, faceted on all sides. He said, 'If you can work the story light, you can have every adventure.' 'How?' we asked. Professor G held it up. 'All you have to do is believe in stories. Can you do that?' 'Yes,' we all hollered. 'I believe in stories. I believe in stories,' I shouted. And look at that. The funny lantern hovered and glowed, casting light on his books. 'I knew you could,' he said. 'If you believe in stories and read and share them, you can make a brilliant light.' 'What happened to him?' Tish asked. Grandma beamed at her. 'Professor G wrote his own stories. They named a library after him. And best of all, the library looks just like the story light.' The end."
Thank you so much for that lovely story, Diane. The Story Light. It's soon to become a classic and read often in our building, I'm sure of it. Our next speaker is Nellie El-Sakari. Nellie, are you aboard the mothership?
Yes, I'm aboard, thanks.
Thank goodness. What's the title of your story?
So my story is titled Beginnings.
We'd love to hear it.
Okay. So it was a strange sight, not quite a tower. It was too squat for that, nor a home. It was too large, too austere for anyone to call it so. It was too strange, too foreboding. It did not match its surroundings. The structure, an upside-down pyramid of sorts, had been raised up in a series of cement and glass blocks, clashing with the surrounding foliage and overgrowth. The people of Regalia call it the mothership because they believe it to be so, a spaceship, like the tale of Noah's Ark, come to Regalia to save old Earth and start anew, bringing with it the chosen few, to populate New Earth. In the beginning, there was only the bottom layer. Once the vessel had reached Regalia, man had built it up, added on layer after layer, outfitting it with cement and sheets of glass, lifting it up to the skies, a symbol of old Earth's new beginnings on Regalia. Cyril had captained the ship those 200 years ago, and the effort, by all accounts, had been successful. The Regalians had thrived, planted the seeds they'd brought with them, recreated the technology of old Earth, the same, but modified to suit their needs. For 150 years, all had been well, until the meteor had struck. People hid away in the belly of the ship. They bided their time. But now, as before, it was time for a new beginning. Like when the mothership had landed, it was time to build anew.
Thank you for that story. Appreciate it. Our next author is let me tell you who it is. Oh, my great muse, Jennifer Franzen. Wow. Are you aboard, Jennifer?
I am indeed, Scott.
Well, thank goodness. And I'm not kidding that she's my great muse. She has every key to the mothership. Who's in charge of the mothership, ladies and gentlemen? Jennifer Franzen. It might not look like that on the org chart, but she is, trust me. Jennifer, I asked you to write many stories because I was concerned I wouldn't get enough, but we got plenty. And what story are you about to read for us right now?
The story I'm going to read right now is called A Substitution.
And it's by Jennifer Franzen.
Mrs. Fum looked at the half-eaten loaf, then back at her husband. I know you like it better made from scratch, she said. So do I. But the ingredients are getting so hard to get. And then there's all the grinding. I'm not as young as I was, you know. They both knew this last plea was meant more to mollify Mr. Fum than anything else. Using the grinder was good exercise, really, and she was still fit despite her age. But, thought Mrs. Fum, she'd happily tell a white lie or two to keep him from brooding over the good old days before that boy, that damned boy, her husband always called him, had ruined everything. Besides, she said persuasively, it's easier for you. No trouble, no news headlines, just a quick trip to the garden center at Home Depot. You can get it by the truckload there, and no one even cares. She picked up the grocery list and made a few quick changes. Maybe you could go now, she suggested. It shouldn't be too busy at this time of day. All right, said her husband. Give me the list. Mr. Fum rose heavily from the big chair, and she handed him the list. He read through it and scowled as he saw that 2 Englishmen had been crossed out and replaced by a neatly lettered bone meal, 250 pounds. Damn that boy and his beanstalk anyway, said Mr. Fum as he slammed the door.
Thank you for that story, Jennifer. We love doing sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, and we can always count on Jennifer for her mix of fantasy and horror all in one. In case you've joined us late, this is Short Tales for the Mothership. We're all reading stories that are 250 words or less, stories that could fit on a postcard, celebrating a tradition that editor George Hay started in the 70s when he asked all the great sci-fi novelists of that time to write a story that could fit on a postcard. And that's what you're hearing today. And our next author is Jonathan Goldstein. Jonathan, are you aboard? He is. Yes. He is. And what is the title of your story, Jonathan?
It is called Why I Destroyed Time Travel, an original composition.
Thank you, Jonathan Goldstein. Let's hear your story now.
It's Goldstein, by the way.
Thank you. So noted.
Sorry. It's okay. I built Why I Destroyed Time Travel. I built time travel in the year 2025. I did have to destroy my time travel device, the Zorlon cannon. This trial, being held in the year 2030, will explain why I committed no crime. I did some good things with time travel. Donald Trump became a pauper and powerless. The COVID-19 vaccine came into being a lot faster than expected. However, I almost killed Homo erectus, the caveman which discovered fire. Alexander Graham Bell never invented the telephone, and Hitler came way too close to winning World War II. That said, I reinvented the cannon to showed the judge and jury why the Zorlon cannon should never be recreated by anyone. It was simply too dangerous and unpredictable. On May 30th, 2030, I showed the judge and jury why I should destroy my invention at 9 a.m. I was acquitted by noon.
Acquitted! Thank you, Jonathan Goldstein. Our next author, Bryce Grubbs. Bryce, are you aboard the mothership?
I sure am.
Excellent. Now, this the title of your story is tricky because your name is Bryce Grubbs, but the title of your story is...
My name is Lawrence.
Thank you. So here's Bryce Grubbs' story. My name is Lawrence. Thank you, Bryce. Go.
Dear inhabitants, my name is Lawrence, like law and rinse, except rinse is spelled R-E-N-C-E, and I know it's not that difficult of a name, but it makes it clear that I'm important. I'm a building fairy, which means I work some of the highest levels of tech-infused magic known to man to protect and maintain buildings against clogged toilets and the occasional attack from deranged dictators that only happened once. Most days, however, are spent simply maintaining the building and observing the inhabitants go about their lives, unaware of my existence. My therapist asked me if I cared that I don't get any recognition. I always say the same thing. It's a thankless job. I knew that before I started, no use in complaining now, which is mostly true. However, on some of the harder days, there is a part of me that deserves a bit of recognition. Maybe a thank you, or a prayer, or maybe even a festival. Not a necessity, just a suggestion. Unfortunately, it's against my contract to discuss my existence, which is why I'm writing this anonymous letter. To all of you who wander on mine or my siblings' insides, be grateful and respectful. And also, don't just abuse the toilets because you're not at home. Because at the heart of every building is someone like me holding shit down. P.S. Lawrence isn't my real name, it's my stage name. That killed the whole anonymity bit I'm working at, you know?
I know what you mean, Lawrence. What a beautiful story. And we will be on our best behavior in the building from now on, knowing that there is a building fairy who's working very hard for us, and so anonymously. Thank you, Bryce Grubbs. Thank you for that story. So again, this is Short Tales from the Mothership. We're reading stories that could potentially fit on a postcard. And perhaps I didn't tell the authors that we are going to take all of your stories and make a special postcard for each and every one of you that we'll mail to you through the post office, which is still alive, and we're looking forward to that. We always keep one copy of the postcard here because we display it here in our building whenever we do the show. So we'll make one postcard for here, one postcard for you, and look for that in the mail. Our next author is a prolific author, Margaret Harmon. Margaret, are you aboard the mothership?
I am aboard the mothership.
Thank you. And what is the title of your story?
A fly.
Well, please continue.
Ah, they're gone. I'll have the fly of the place till they come home. Don't look at me like that. I didn't choose to be a fly. I didn't even know there was reincarnation. My church promised heaven, golden streets, harps, halos. Well, I got wings and no harp, but I can buzz. Know what bugs me? Pardon the pun. I refuse to live in fear on principle. But when they raise that swatter or newspaper, you focus and jump or you're dead. This incarnation won't last long. Flies live a month max. The real problem, I found out, is you keep coming back as a fly until you earn your way up. And what can a fly do that's significant? Also screw up at this and you come back as a cockroach. Yeah, very bad. I just learned I've been human 32 times in 8,000 years, all over the planet. This unexpected is what gets you thinking. I've always been top of the food chain, power chain, electronic does it all for you chain, even beautiful, that's power. So what do I do now? Not eat their food? Hey, I'm hungry too. Not buzz? Just wait till somebody opens a door and slip out? Flies have like zero power. We are not in charge. To move up, I'll have to eat a ton of garbage and win a medal or be lunch for a rare bird. You know, flying is amazing. What if I'd rather just...
Thank you, Margaret. I would love to have given you that swat myself. Oh, what an end. What an end to your story. Thank you, Margaret Harmon. Our next author is Justin Janger, and I think I saw a book of his available on Amazon.com, a sci-fi book, I think. Is that true? Justin, are you aboard? Are you aboard the mothership? Oh, actually, Justin isn't aboard the mothership. He's in a part of the galaxy that just didn't allow him to communicate with us, and he had to ask Gabriel Pan to read for him. Gabriel, are you aboard the mothership?
Indeed I am, Scott. Hi there.
Oh, so Gabe is going to read 2 stories for us, and then I have to follow him, and I've spent my career trying to not follow Gabriel Pan because he's got such a beautiful voice. Boy, I must not know the right people in charge for me to have to follow him. Here's your first of 2 stories that you're going to read for people, and it is Justin Janger's story. What is the title, Gabriel?
The title of the story is called Best Effort.
Thank you. Please continue.
Best Effort by Justin Janger. The alien ship hung in the distance over the capital with a pregnant malice, casting a dark shadow over miles of homes and buildings. The mysterious spikes and tubes protruding from the ship looked like they were designed for malicious reasons. Anything with that many sharp and pointy things was rarely good. "Do you have the translation?" the president asked, his voice cracking ever so slightly. "Even with the key they provided, it's been difficult. It's, to pardon the phrase, a totally alien way of forming thought. However, we think we are close, very close," the lead scientist assured him. They both looked out the window at the hovering shape that had arrived 2 weeks ago, enigmatic in its intentions, except for the message repeated over and over to anyone who would listen, broadcasted on every frequency imaginable. The scientist's tablet beeped. He looked down and read it quickly as the president watched, his face pale. Almost in the same instant, an ear-splitting thunderclap startled him, rattling everything in the room as they witnessed the massive cruiser go from stillness to speeding out of the atmosphere and disappearing. It was as if the aliens somehow knew that the message had been received and it was time to go. "What is it? What does it say?" the president demanded, his voice cracking even more obviously than before. Slowly, reluctantly, the scientist read, "We are sorry. We cannot protect you any longer. Good luck." That's Best Effort by Justin Janger.
Thank you again, Gabriel Pan. And again, nobody wants to follow Gabriel Pan, and that's why he's reading the next story, too. He's reading a story for the author Barbara Javor, who also is held up elsewhere in the galaxy and can't participate this time around. But Gabriel, what is the title of the next story that you're reading?
This one's called Purgatory by Barbara Javor. Simon glanced around the quiet, deserted lobby of the tall office building, noting disused furniture and dusty windows. He didn't recognize the place nor recall why he was there. "What am I doing here?" A deep, raspy voice filled the lobby. "You are about to enter Purgatory." Simon turned but saw no one. "Why? I didn't die. What kind of purgatory is this?" "Of the 7 deadly sins, you are in the realm of avarice, where people are punished for their unfathomable greed," the voice said. "A place where they suffer the consequences of taking from innocence and selling what is not theirs to the devil, of mortgaging their predatory souls at the expense of everyone else." "I don't belong here. I'm just a research librarian." "You have been chosen for a reason. To find peace for your soul, you must first need to figure out why you were sent here." Simon glanced out the window and saw a Wall Street sign on the corner. He scanned the building directory. Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, Washington Mutual Bank, Bernie Madoff. The list included nearly 500 occupants in this high-rise purgatory. He got it. He was on the ground floor of financial hell, where banks and financiers failed under the weight of their unquenchable avarice. Simon was an information researcher. He wasn't part of the problem. He would be part of the solution. He would excavate his way out of this purgatory by digging up the truth about the purveyors of greed. That's Purgatory by Barbara J.
Well read, Gabriel Pan. We'll let Barbara know that you should do her next book on tape, without a doubt. And the next story is my story. I'm Scott Paulson. I'm an alumnus of UC San Diego and very proud to be here with this library project, Short Tales from the Mothership. And this next story is entitled, to be titled, Arboretum. It's not a very dignified statue there at the mothership's arboretum. Elderly John Clancy with edible foliage growing out from his nose and ears. But as a small boy, just as he came aboard for the mothership's maiden voyage, Johnny did indeed stick beans up his nose and in his ears. He said it was noisy and smelly in the quarantine holding area, and the beans were his defense. He had hurriedly pulled the beans from the stuffing of the scarecrow doll his great-grandmother made for him. Minutes later, the doll and all other fabric belongings were incinerated by quarantine officials. The statue celebrates the miracle of the high-yield bean crop that saved the crew and passengers from starvation. You can always count on, well, you can't always count on food replicators, but as the Clancys were known to say, you could always count on Johnny to put inappropriate things in his ears and up his nose. Johnny grew up to be a very dignified man, and he barely remembers the original bean incident. He was a good sport to the very end of his long, distinguished life, even when he had to judge the bean stuffing contest at the Clancy statue, where he had to taste every bean casserole submitted by every amateur cook at the mothership's semi-annual high-yield bean crop festival. Our next author couldn't be here. He's in another part of the galaxy, Bahram Karadmand, and this would have been his third or fourth trip on the mothership, but he did submit a story, and Barbara Henderson's going to read it, isn't it? Barbara, are you still aboard? Did you leave?
I stayed put here.
Thank you. I know, because it's so easy just to get in a small vehicle and just take off. But could you just remind me what the title of the story is?
Yes, it's 1000 Degrees.
By Bahram Karadmand. Thank you, Barbara. Take it away.
The building was empty. 2 crows leaped on and off the 7th floor windowsills. Elevator shafts were filled with ash. There were no books, no shelves, nothing except concrete, steel, and glass. Everything else was burned long ago. No one expected the new strain of hantavirus to be this resistant. All biotech and biomedical labs trying to find a cure moved to Coronado first. But after the bridge was shot down by rogue armed protesters, the Navy had to rapidly move everything to San Clemente. The virus had peculiar traits. It lay dormant for 1 year in bone marrow. A 3-month release period would ensue, where the only symptom for carriers was minor headaches. Consequently, sudden replication led to extreme arrhythmia and cardiac arrest. It was dubbed the Andean ending, or the rat racing heart syndrome, before it was identified as a type of hantavirus, HV76. The worst characteristic of the virus was that the particles were extremely resistant to detergents and remained virulent for years. The only sterilization method was extreme heat. Civilizations on the western coast of the Americas crumbled to be rebuilt in 100 years, 5 half-lives of the virion. The rest of the world survived because precautionary protocols instated in the early 20s had been tested and efficiently debugged. People had taken insufficient care of their biome, and now it was returning the favor, proving yet again that knowledge is useless if it is not used properly. Books were not needed if people didn't read. Burn them to kill the virus, they said. The crows now ruled the coast and took shelter from weekly tornadoes in the concrete lollipop. The building stood still.
Thank you, Barbara. That was well read. I love that story from Baram Karatmand. And I'm sure we'll see him next year. And at the end of the show today, we will talk about what we have in mind for next year, because next year when we would do this, it's also the 50th anniversary of our building, the William Pereira iconic library building we have here. And it's also going to be the 50th anniversary of one of the first postcard stories that George Hay asked for. Arthur C. Clarke's story will have been published 50 years ago when we gather again. So there's a lot of 50s going on. But we continue. Is Janet Krause aboard?
Yes.
I thought I saw her in the hallway.
Yes, Scott.
Oh, excellent. You are here. What is the title of your story?
The title is New Star.
I'd love to hear it.
That new star, I thought to myself as I studied the sky one early spring night. It's moving. Did I imagine it coming closer? What have I been smoking? The star danced in the night sky for a while, zooming in and out. I suppose I should have been frightened, but the dance was intriguing, not scary. Slowly, the star descended to rest in the grass within my reach. It looked like a large snow globe, an opaque glass bubble atop a black stand, flat on the bottom. The globe shimmered and throbbed with a soft light. I must be dreaming. I sat up slowly. As I reached out cautiously, the funny star emitted a whirring sound. I pulled back. A little door in the base popped open, and out flew about a dozen little beings that reminded me of Tinkerbell. They began to flitter and buzz all around me. They danced as the star had done, back and forth, up and down, approached me, then flitted away. When they came near my face, all I could do was smile. Each time they came near me, they left a sweet sensation. I began to giggle like an idiot. As quickly as they had come, they flitted back and the little door closed behind them with a hum. The globe light throbbed intensely. The star took off into the night sky until it disappeared from view. A strange sort of peace enveloped me. I thanked my lucky stars.
Yes. And I got here's your lucky star right here. We'll hear it again. I love that story. Thank you very much. It was delightful. And we really should do that one with some extra minor chimes and harpassandos. We'll get together and do that.
Looks like we may be experiencing a little technical difficulties. We are going to continue on with Katie Litwinski. Katie, would you like to start your story?
Sure, thanks. called Above Below. They came from the sky, the news report said. No video evidence, but the statements of several respected officials confirmed the phenomenon. Malform, oddly colored, and most assuredly malevolent. It was War of the Worlds if the monsters had been just a little bit less obvious in their destructive intentions. Nonetheless, it was deemed imperative that we ready the defenses and attack on sight. Parents barricaded their doors and children screamed, sure that they had seen one of the monsters outside their window. Public gatherings grinded to a halt as accusations flew through the air, tearing at the delicate fabric of social niceties. Accusations intensified from failure to report an alien sighting to being an alien yourself disguised as human, a wolf in sheep's clothing. As personal tensions aggregated and transformed into national tensions, the wars began. We accused China of being alien lovers, and China announced that it had obtained drone footage of an alien shelter in Albania, which the Albanians insisted was a front designed by Italian insurgents, and before anyone could make sense of the accusations, the missiles were flying. With an unprecedented unity, the world melted together until only the survivors remained in the waste. And in the dust I sat, staring up at the bleary sun, when a large gray shape descended and nestled between the hills. From the gray emerged a figure, sinuous and beautiful. The figure looked at me, and I looked at it, and its singular question reverberated in my mind. What happened here?
Thank you so much, Katie. It looks like the mothership has lost contact with Scott, so we'll continue on with Elizabeth Peng, who's going to tell us her story. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Sure thing. The title of my story is called Mother's Cradle. Floating beneath Saturn's deceitful colossus, along its rings like the track of a record's needle, we dine on the last of Mother's memories. The heated wrath of a summer's day, the tender swoop of hollyhock nape, the cistern of dew in a lily's cusp. We feast on the pale image of a child's laugh, on the gasp-alighting mortal tongue, on the love bite upon hapless brain, nibbling at these landscapes until verdant green is left to barren brown, velvet blue to wilted maroon, until all that is left are lagoon-deep wounds and the earth's mercy-begging croons. What is a memory in a mouth compared to a pupil in one's eye, an all-seeing gap where we remain starved and enlightened? Mother, you pain us with these blank desires, these unmet dreams, these devoted fragments of your passing, taunting the boundaries of our slumber among shedding supernovas and nebula towers. Mother, we hear your silken voice in the dark charm of night. We hear how it sways like a receding shoreline. Mother, the love language we share is without the shape of word or the shadow of promise. Mother, our bodies are merely part of a homebound tide, reaching for your long past presence, like the way a stone returns to its hearth in ocean abyss. Mother, 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 know that you have spoken in righteous fury during your final moments, yet we have only been listening, lapping the final crumbs for our face, never doing.
Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. And while we see if we can get communication with Scott, let me continue on by introducing our next performer and author, Valerie. Valerie, go ahead and tell us your story.
Story is called Sea Change. Emma crouched in the shaded pathway behind the molecular medicine building, a junkie waiting for a hit. There was a time she'd have been shocked at the notion of trading for back alley drugs, but the threat of a painful death could change a lot of things. She wasn't eligible for coverage for gene therapy. Too many comorbidities. Their way of saying she wasn't worth bothering to save. Lawton stepped out from behind a clump of honeysuckle, beckoned her behind it. She hated this, felt like an idiot as well as a criminal. They swapped backpacks, and she waited until he strolled nonchalantly down the path before she slipped out the other direction and made her way to the library. She circled the plaza under the monumental brutalist structure until she could see out over the city, until she was alone. There was no one here, but Emma still felt watched, judged. She twitched the alcohol prep pad against her skin. A breeze tickled up from the canyon. It would have been a beautiful place if it were not the place where she shot up, transforming herself into someone she'd always thought she'd never be, desperate, outlaw, pariah. She leaned back against a cement pillar, facing west, so she could see anyone coming. Emma tried to breathe slowly as the needle went in, and the cold treatment slithered up her arm. Looking up the hill, she imagined the ocean behind it, invisible from here, but relentlessly there, smashing, growing, altering without emotion, transforming.
Thank you so much. That was a great story. We are going to move on to the next story. So Stephen Potts, we are going to save your story until the end so that you can get a nice the introduction that you deserve from our lovely Scott. So we are going to move on to Catherine. Catherine, are you aboard? Are you ready to read?
I am. My story is called Spacing Out. The year is 1947. Edwin Hubble has long discovered the redshift relation and explained how it proves that the universe is expanding. The space age is yet to come, but teens dream of little green men on the red planet. Jeff Ralph is no different. His thoughts often drift to how it will be when humans one day meet these creatures. Meanwhile, on Earth, Jeff sits in his regular booth at Eddie's coffee shop. It's 4:00 p.m. and the lunch crowd has dispersed. He's there to finish an assignment for his editor, an illustration for the cover of a school publication. Ideas are starting to take flight. Edwin Hubble. How would he look in outer space? He sketches the astrophysicist with an oversized head growing upward from atop a shrunken body. If a Hubble ever came to campus, he'd sure like to buy him lunch. Eddie's could maybe name a burger after him. Rare beef patty, bloody, drowned in ketchup, the redshift. His frat brothers could come. No, that wouldn't work. Hubble's a Kappa Sigma. Suddenly it's 6:00. The dinner crowd is coming in. 4 bottles of ink, black, red, purple, and green, sit on the linoleum like tiny rockets ready to take off. Jeff can hardly believe it when an 8-limbed creature crawls out of his pen. It scuttles off the stark white drawing pad in front of him. They'd always said the red planet had little green men, but whoever thought they'd be 2-dimensional?
Thank you so much for that. Alrighty, we are going to move on to our next story. Our next story is by Michael Robinson. Unfortunately, he is out there on a moonwalk. So our next reader is Karen Fisher. Karen, are you ready to read?
Yes, I am. Thank you. That was kind of ticklish coming through the transporter. The story is entitled Cinco de Mayo 2062, and it's by Michael Robinson. It's the bicentennial of Jesse's favorite non-holiday, Cali craziness. A surge rumbles from the Pacific. A murder of kids, victory roars. They know to stretch volleyball nets far from our house. Know our antagonism. Our signs, our smart electrified air fence, offer full transparency. Still, the sea carried their voices, the noise of that too crowded beach. Never long ago enough. Jesse's admonishments. Sunset, solar torches will round their improvised court. They'll play until the beer hollows them, makes them stumble and heave into kelp and hissing sand, laughing. Too numb, too slow to make the sea a commode. Yet the stink of all that was hours away. Officer Angie hovers up the boardwalk. I'm on the porch. My dear Fred, knitting a pussy hat from a yarn repurposed from a sweater. Felt weirdly nostalgic, I suppose. Didn't ask. Officer Angie halts at our gate. Everything all right, Charlie? Fred? Her body tenses as if half expecting the real reply. Fred glances up, beams a comforting smile. Me? Grand, I lie. Couldn't be better. Should have stayed pat with grand. Angie lingers. Perhaps another question might get at our truth. But she knew it. Parents never stop missing a child. Jesse would have loved the bicentennial. Mexico beat the French from Puebla in 1862, then lost it again 2 years later. Jesse loved the irony. The virus was ironic like that. Later, Fred and I cry over half-eaten tamales, cried tears we'd been unable to rid ourselves of since our 40s. We maintain social distancing today for Jesse.
Thank you so much for that story, Karen. I'm sure Michael would be happy to hear it read aloud by you. We are going to continue onward with our next author. Mina, we will have you introduce yourself and then go ahead with your story. And for those of you who are still with us, thank you so much for staying. We are going to just have a couple more stories and then we'll do our big conclusion. So stay put where you are and we will continue on now with Mina. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mina, and the story I'm going to share with you is called From the Lighthouse. Early morning before sunrise, no later than that, a reminder from the lighthouse keeper took me back to where I was standing. Tilting window pane in a single room of a strange-looking house hung on the cliff that once was another building overlooking to the destination I could not take my eyes off since I had arrived. Underneath was the calm ocean where a glisten of twilight was seen against the periodic waves coming from afar. Willie Berger, or Mr. Berger as he preferred to be called, was the bright blue-eyed old folk who has held this lonely job for who knew how long. Because the only accessible way to the Geisel Library was by boat, I desperately needed his guidance on this challenging quest. The quest of retrieving the archived manuscript hidden on the fourth floor of the now half-sunken library. I would say 5 a.m., no later than 6, as the big boy would be roaming around for his breakfast and he might mistake our little bird for one. The way he mentioned the venomous creature by its nickname did not make this mission sound any less suicidal. Crawling up underneath the water was a 560-foot-long snake that had long been known to guard whatever left inside the library. The 3.5 floor is the only place we can dock our boat, he went on as I wasn't saying anything. And then it is all yours. He finished with a grand gesture indicating that I would then have to be on my own. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us. Let me see if we have our next speaker in the house. Alrighty, so our next author is a very special author. Let's see, so we've got Alex Shee. He is in 6th grade, I believe. So Alex is by far our youngest author of the afternoon. Alex, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your story? Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Alex. I am in 6th grade and I'm 12 years old. I go to Rolston Middle School. My story is called An Alien Talks to the Strongest Species on Earth. Greetings, human. I have come to your Earth from Proxima b, a planet 4.24 light years away from your Earth. I have come to speak with the strongest species on Earth. While I am on Earth, I have made up a name to go by, Alex. When I first arrived on your planet, I first tried to capture the various tall and short green things, but they just stood there, not even trying to escape. So I thought they must be the strongest. They were called plants. But they said they were not the most plentiful. Viruses were. So then I went to the viruses, but they looked very tired. One virus said that humans were already researching and experimenting with cures and vaccines to kill their species, and that their time was almost over. It was the coronavirus. So then I went to you, human. You are so powerful that you can warm your whole planet so that you will no longer need to wear clothes. In fact, you are so selfless, too, that you melt all the icebergs so that the ocean levels will rise and the fish and ocean creatures will have more water. You are a truly clever species. You are even depelting the ozone layer so the plants and those black boards on your roof can get more solar energy. Even though I have not yet figured out why you are dirtying your air, you are so intelligent, I am sure it must have some kind of benefit. What? You say that these are not good things? Well, you are the strongest and smartest species on Earth. Most of all, you know what is right and what is wrong. You will always overcome challenges to do what is best for your planet, and I have faith in you.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was great. A wonderful story. Next up, we have Howard Wu, who will be reading some of his haikus for us. So Howard, are you with us?
Unmute. Unmute. Oh, okay. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'd call this haiku, but it definitely is poetry of sorts. Inspired by a book that should be familiar with you folks if you've been around as long as I have. And it's entitled Stacks Beyond Zebra. The Geisel Library may have books galore, organized in categories more than a score, so you can find them with ease. But when you reach the top floor, you could wish for much more than just books on books under Z's. Oh, to find books without convention, look for shelves in other dimensions within the building's odd geometry. In Zuz, Was, or would be unknown ologies, Hump, Fuddle, and Glick, unforgivable anthologies. Pops up and scratchers hidden under Nuke and Snee. Kwanzan and Spaz would be written like jazz with bad grammars that is fancy and free. Foob, Zatz, and Jog would leave you in a bit of a fog, lost crafts of unknown history. Mysteries in Fung and Itch would tear you a stitch as if you were to fall out of a tree. But to read books in Zerg and Vu, or Vo, I never figure out how to pronounce that one. To read books in Zerg or Vo, you must not leave the room to go, as these are too valuable, you see. But you won't find in High and, as they were left intentionally blank for those subjects impossible to be.
That was lovely. Thank you so much, Howard.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like we may have our captain of the ship on board once again. So let's see, we've got Elisa joining us. And Elisa, have you heard from our captain? Here he is. Just one moment while we hammer this out. And we'll be right back on with Scott.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, Elisa. Scott is blending into our background a little bit.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I can hear. Yep. Okay. Here's Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Hello, I'm sorry I got waylaid with the meteorite shower. But I heard that everyone's been reading brilliantly. I can't hear anything right now, and I'm wondering, what story are we on right now?
We are on the last story, Scott.
It'll be The Hive by Jen Gray.
No, this is The Hive by Jen Gran.
Is Jane speaking yet?
Jen, go ahead.
This story is called The Hive, and it features Roger Revelle, who's the founder of my college that I'm currently in, and so the narrator is Roger Revelle, not me personally. Okay. So the date was June 29th, 1970. It was a quiet affair. 17,000 cubic yards of concrete, 38,000 square feet of glass, and 300 rods of steel apparated on site. The structure was conjured from the grounds, stark against the rustling fog. The sight of it arrested me. Awestruck, I could not tear my eyes away. And that's when I saw them. The visitors were flexing their dorsal antennae. They extended their pointers, and as if scratching an itch on the air in front of them, they carved out spaces of green. I was unable to hold my gasp at the sight. They turned towards me, and with a few clicks of their mandibles, a foreign voice sounded in my head. "Good evening, Roger. You would do. Do. Wait, do for what? How do you know my name?" I was unable to resist the questions. "What are you?" Fear was catching up to me now, and "What the hell is that?" I motioned at the structure. "Well, it's not much, and it's not your concern. As for the structure, think of it as a hive bookkeeping. A place where knowledge is collected and passed from human to human, gradually condensing, and what's left will not expire. You'll visit again to collect the results, and before you ask, no, you don't have a choice." And in the same manner they disappeared again, leaving no evidence of their visit besides the concrete in front of me. Dumbfounded, I headed back to the office.
Scott, it looks like we are having a little bit of a technical difficulty once more. We can't hear you. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
Go ahead, Scott.
So our last speaker of these 250-word items is Stephen Potts. If you've ever taken a sci-fi literature class at UC San Diego over the past couple or more decades, the instructor was Stephen Potts, still very popular amongst alums and still known on campus. Even if he wanted to keep a low profile, he can't. He is beloved. And Stephen Potts has a story that'll close out the 250-word ones. I got one more 50-word one that I'll try to do after, but the finale at this point is certainly Stephen Potts.
Thank you, Scott. This is Geisel Goes Forth. No one predicted the 6.5 tremor that shook the Rose Canyon For the next 7.5 hours, the outside the great crystal with countless eye-defying facets. No one was allowed inside what would reportedly have been an uninhabitable Escheresque maze of floors, walls, and ceilings interfacing at right angles with all the others.
My apologies, Stephen. I'm going to ask you to start over. It looks like in the beginning we were having some glitches with your video and audio. So if you can, please start over.
Well, okay.
Thank you.
Again, this is Geisel Goes Forth. No one predicted the 6.5 tremor that shook the Rose Canyon Fault at 4:18 a.m. on May 16th. No one predicted that the quake would cause the Geisel Library collapse temporarily into a four-dimensional hyperstructure. For the next 7.5 hours, it appeared from the outside as a great crystal. Countless facets. No one could inside what would reportedly have been an unknown.
Looks like we're having some technical difficulties. Scott, we're going to put you back on.
Thank you.
Could you read for Professor Potts? It looks like he's having some technical difficulties as he's connecting from far, far away. So if you wouldn't mind reading his story.
All right. I'll look for it as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to read for Stephen Potts. I just have to find the story. You've been listening to Short Tales from the Mothership. 250 words or less, sci-fi microfiction. When possible, referencing our Mothership Library here at UC San Diego that was designed by William Pereira. Truly a spaceship wonder. And we do this at least annually. I'm going to read Stephen Potts' story now. No one predicted the 6.5 tremor that shook the Rose Canyon Fault at 4:18 a.m. on May 16th, 2022. No one could have predicted that the quake would cause Geisel Library to collapse temporarily into a four-dimensional hyperstructure. For the next 7.5 hours, it appeared from the outside as a great multi-layered crystal with countless eye-defying facets. No one was allowed inside what would reportedly have been an unnavigable Escheresque maze of floors, walls, and ceilings interfacing at right angles with all the others. When consulted, UCSD's physics faculty agreed that this occurrence was impossible. Someone in the Clarke Center for Human Imagination observed there was a science fiction story that explained it. Robert Heinlein's He Built a Crooked House. As the library gradually reopened in the days that followed, all at first appeared normal. When 3 books long reported lost or missing turned up, some speculated that a leak to alternative dimensions persisted. UCSD's physicists also proclaimed this impossible, though one offered to investigate further if he could secure a grant. And then a staff librarian discovered on the shelf a previously uncatalogued novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald entitled Save Me the Last Tango, finished in 1949, although it is well known Fitzgerald died in 1940 amid composing The Last Tycoon. Another book in an unknown, presumably Semitic language turned up in the PJ stacks. The Dr. Seuss collection suddenly included sketches for the 1938 American edition of Tolkien's The Hobbit. That was only the beginning. And that was Stephen Potts' story for our Mothership, acting as the finale for the 250 words. Although before I go, we want to let you know that we might want to try 50-word stories for the next one to celebrate Geisel Library's 50th and to celebrate that Arthur C. Clarke postcard, which is turning 50. It's so hard to do 50 words, though, so we might have to backtrack. But in the meantime, is Jennifer Franson still in the house?
Yes, I'm still here, Scott.
Jennifer, You've got those two delightful 50-word items. Do you have them before you?
I do.
Excellent. The first one's addressed to me, and I would like to hear a dramatic reading of it at this time. That first one that mentions my name.
You shall have it. This one's called In 50 Words or Fewer. I've thought and thought and thought and thought, and finally have concluded, Scott, a paltry 50 words will not accommodate an awful lot of character or theme or plot or exposition or whatnot. In fact, the task is rather fraught.
But you proved yourself wrong immediately, Jennifer Franson, and you wrote another one that truly is a full-fledged story at 50 words. Let me hear that one.
Okay, this one is called Another View. Moira scowled. Spaceship? That library building isn't a spaceship. No, it's an enormous crouching spider. Those diagonal beams are the legs folded under it. Those mirrored windows are its eyes. Don't be so morbid, Carrie snapped. What was that? The huge concrete limbs shuddered and shifted.
Brava, brava. Well, I do want to thank all of our authors and readers tonight, including Christina Continelli, who had some emergency haikus that we are saving for the 50th. And I have those, but we'll use them then. I want to thank Carlson Chin, Ariel Amante, Will Bowen, Bettina Davis, Nicholas Deason, Diane Dodson, Nellie Elsikari, Jennifer Franson, Jonathan Goldstein, got it? Bryce Brutz, Margaret Harmon, Justin Janger, Barbara Jaffor, Baram Karamad, we're going to Janet Krause, Katie Latwinsky, Elizabeth Pang, Valerie Pulachar, Stephen Potts, Catherine Welfpanas, Michael Robinson, Prangiwi Mena Sangchan, Alex Shee. I'm sorry I missed your story, Alex, but I'll watch it. Howard Rue, Jing Granzhu, and of course Karen Fisher read, Barbara Henderson read, and Gabriel Pan read. Thank you. So thank you, everybody. And we hope to meet in person next time. So we also want to thank Yekta and Elisa for all their secret help. And they had to take over completely, didn't they? God bless you. So long, everybody. Thank you for coming for Short Tales from the Mothership.
Welcome back. We're redoing a couple of our speakers from our Short Tales from the Mothership because of some technical difficulties. And we appreciate you tuning in once again for this special coda. Once again, we welcome our fellow futurists, our intrepid inventors, our time travelers, soothsayers. Thank you again. And this redo reading comes from our good friend, Will Bowen, who's been very kind to us over the years. And Will, are you aboard for this redo? Where are you? Talk to me, Will.
I'm here.
Thank goodness.
I'm here.
You're sounding great. And you can talk at a lower level because your microphone is excellent. So you can take it down. You're at 11 right now. Oh, good. You were at 11 and now you're at 7. So 7 is good for you.
Okay.
So, Will, what is your story entitled to be titled?
Throw My Dust to the Stars.
Here's your intro. Proceed, Will.
They were there to throw my dust to the stars, Sarek and my beloved Antel. They hooked up pretty fast once I was out of the picture, maybe even before. What can you do? I'm dead, deceased, no longer living, lifeless, useless, inert, just dust. Dust with eyeballs. Yes, I can still see the world around me. I see it all. But I'm just dust, a fine gray powder that smudges easily, a figment, a purloined ghost, just hanging around in limbo, in the in-between state, hoping for revenge, stalling the bright light that will take me past the stars to the afterlife. Can there be revenge from the other side? All that's left of me is the shiny gold urn that sits on the console of our ship. The lovebirds are giving it a space burial, tossing it into a sea of stars, into the light and dark, into the void. It will float for eons, deep, deep into space, space that touches everywhere and nowhere. I will end up at the bottom of the universe. How romantic. I have wondered if the ant I squish under my finger misses himself. Did they wonder? Yes, I miss myself. I wanted to see the future. I'm holding out for one last act done for the honor of the ant that was forgotten. One last program will run. As the urn leaves the airlock, a shipboard self-destruct sequence will initiate, sweetening those two birds' ride across the stars.
Thank you, Will Bowen. That was most excellent. We look forward to seeing you again on the mothership in the new school year when the library building is celebrating its 50th anniversary. So we'll have another special story from you that year, that's for sure. And now, finally, the finale. Even in this redo, it has to be Stephen Potts. If you've ever taken a sci-fi literature class on the UC San Diego campus over the past couple decades or so, guess who your teacher was? Stephen Potts. And so delightful to have you here. I know you're keeping very busy, and we do see you on campus often, but you've had a chance to write a story for the mothership. And what is it titled?
Geisel Goes Forth.
And I think I'll start with a little explosion for you for that story. That's just some backstory, I think, for your story. Here's your little explosion. And proceed.
No one predicted the 6.5 tremor that shook the Rose Canyon Fault at 4:18 on May 16th, 2022. No one could have predicted that the quake would cause Geisel Library to collapse temporarily into a 4-dimensional hyperstructure. For the next 7.5 hours, it appeared from the outside as a great multi-layered crystal with countless eye-defying facets. No one was allowed inside what would reportedly have been an unnavigable Escher-esque maze of floors, walls, and ceilings, interfacing at right angles with all the others. When consulted, UCSD's physics faculty agreed that this occurrence was impossible, but someone in the Clarke Center for Human Imagination observed there was a science fiction story that explained it. Robert Heinlein's He Built a Crooked House. As the library gradually reopened in the days that followed, all at first appeared normal. When 3 books long reported lost or missing turned up, some speculated that a leak to alternate dimensions persisted. UCSD's physicist also proclaimed this impossible, though one offered to investigate further if he could secure a grant. And then, a staff librarian discovered on the shelf a previously uncatalogued novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald entitled Save Me the Last Tango, finished in 1949. Although it's well known Fitzgerald died in 1940 amid composing The Last Tycoon. Another book in an unknown, presumably Semitic language turned up in the PJ stacks. The Dr. Seuss collection suddenly included sketches for the 1938 American edition of Tolkien's The Hobbit. That was only the beginning.
Thank you, Stephen Potts. How sweet. I think my sister for filming some of this. Oh, the stars are over here. You see the stars? Set up over here. Stephen Potts, thank you so much. Are you around this summer?
Oh, yes.
Good, because we might do a couple teasers this summer, or a couple stories, and hopefully you'll be able to join us. I'm so grateful to have had an opportunity to do this extra coda to deal with some difficulties so that Stephen Potts and our good friend Will Bowen could tell their stories in their own voice as opposed to mine. I filled in for you, but I'd much rather listen to you two read. Excellent job, both of you. Excellent writing as well. So we'll see you in 2020 for another short Tales from the Mothership. It will partially be part of the 50th anniversary celebration of our iconic Geisel Library building. That wonderful structure designed by William Pereira. We'll be celebrating it all year, and certainly with some mothership stories. So thank you, Yekta, for helping us with this. We'll all see you in the new year.